Hello everybody and welcome to another E5 podcast. This is going to be a good one. Let me introduce my co-host.
Dan Jackson, aka Dan's the Engineer.
Dan, we have got a stranger in our midst.
We have.
Or do we call them a friend? I don't know. Let's just introduce yourself.
Hello, my name is Will Lloyd, and I am Technical Manager for the Fire Industry Association.
Right, best behaviour, salute, all that good stuff. Fire Industry Association. Well, welcome to the E5 podcast, and tell us a little bit about yourself, Will. You know, what do you do for a living on a day-to-day?
Okay, well, I started life as an electrical apprentice.
Nice.
So I left school at 16, got an apprenticeship, managed to complete my apprenticeship, did 236 parts 1, 2 and 3, the old C course, did the testing and inspection, moved up the ranks as an electrician, improving my skills and things like that. And then I started doing fire alarms and security systems because I found it interesting and different. And I ended up working for specialist fire alarm companies. And then I've worked for various companies, including the ECA. I know that's a dirty word, Searchsure, BRE, and I'm now with the FIA. We're not the Formula One people, even though people do ring us up about that. And I also sit on British Standards Committees. I sit on the Standards Committee that writes 5839 Part 1 and 6. So the recent editions have got my fingerprints all over it, unfortunately.
Okay, I've got it open in front of me.
We are not as vain as JPEL. We don't insist on having our names in the front.
Are you suggesting a JPEL committee are vain? My God, you know them well.
No comment.
Yeah, I can say it. I think the era of having your name in that book is long gone. Unless you produce something of stellar quality with no mistakes, then yeah, fine. But hey, we know there's mistakes in it. Right, so I'm gonna go straight for the controversy straight away, and I'll probably get shot for even saying this, but I really struggle to find a good fire alarm subcontractor. No matter what role I'm working, I've been a client for nearly 10 years. I always struggle to find a decent fire alarm maintenance or installation contractor. So before we get to why that possibly could be, what are both of your views on quality within the industry and approach to quality? Start with Dan. How do you think the fire alarm contracting industry takes it, or the electrical industry for that matter? And I'm not talking about just the ISO 9001, because I have met fire alarm contractors who've gone, we're registered to ISO 9001, and my response has always been, yeah, my mum can get it, who cares?
But so firstly, Paul, do you get to choose your subcontractor?
I get to select my maintenance contractor, but fire alarms are always the specialist subcontractors. So, which I don't get to choose, because obviously I would then be in breach of procurement rules, because it's down to them to procure best value. I can't tell them who to choose. Or what I can do is I can say that the specialist will be registered with an appropriate industry body. But the trouble is it then again putting my dumb client hat on. What's an appropriate industry body? Because for me, I've sat in rooms with when I've been on a site and I've gone, are you BAFE registered or are you LPS registered? And sometimes when I've mentioned both words, the contractor have gone, pardon? And I'm like, you must know at least one of them. Speak to the director. And the managing director turns up and he knows what they are, but all the blokes working for him haven't got a clue.
So in terms of like quality, there are some very, very good fire alarm engineers and companies out there for sure, without a shadow of a doubt. But just like the electrical industry, it's also flooded with people who haven't a clue what they're doing, either consciously or unconsciously. There's a lot of chances out there. There's a lot of electrical companies doing fire alarms that really shouldn't be, because they're not at, they're not where they should be in terms of competence. And it is hard, Paul, but I mean, having owned and run an electrical and fire alarm company, when clients got hold of me through recommendation, they were over the moon and overjoyed, because they've just been let down time and time and time and time and time again by a fire alarm company. And I had a very, very, very good team.
I have been let down by some of the largest fire alarm contractors in the country.
Well, I'd argue that they are some of the worst.
Yeah, I know. Well, I've also
like some of the worst. And I mean, I'm not going to name names. We all know who they are.
I'd love to name them.
But the thing is,
very soon after.
The thing is, what you'll find, Paul, is that you'll have some companies who have very good procedures, very good salesmen, very good management. You'll have some very good engineers, but then there'll be a flood of engineers who should not be touching fire alarms. And, obviously money comes into play as well with a lot of this. And I think a lot of companies get away with murder, literally, and they just shouldn't be, because misinterpretation, or again, just trying to play the game to make a few quid. So it is tough. It's really tough. And now I'm consulting. I do actually do two things, Paul. I help electrical companies gain competency or improve their management to suit installing, maintaining, designing, commissioning fire alarms, but also help assess the level of fire alarm companies who are actually doing the work, which is an interesting space.
Yeah, Dan, your niche shouldn't exist if the fire alarm industry was in a good place. But you are right. You are. I mean, I know, because me and you are obviously good friends, so I know lots of what you do, and how even when you were in Blue Surf, you were reaching out to the fire industry, almost trying to say, come on everyone, let's work together, let's go on a journey of improvement. Which was one of the things that made you stand out. What's your view?
Well, first thing you've got to remember is that the fire alarm industry is a small subset of the electrical industry. So if you think the electrical industry is small, the fire alarm industry is a smaller version of that. So we have all the problems the electrical industry has.
Yeah.
We're just smaller, and we're very inward looking.
Yeah.
And it's very, this is secret Santa stuff. You don't know how to do this. This is specialist. And to some extent, we get removed from the client an awful lot, because you as a client will want an M&E package. That goes out to an M&E contractor. Then that'll go to an electrical contractor who will strip out the electrical package. Then that specialist area of the fire alarm will be kicked down to another specialist contractor. But we want to be closer to the client, because at the end of the day, we want to sell a maintenance contract.
Yeah.
Because the fire alarm industry likes maintenance contracts, because you've got to have a fire alarm maintained, and it's recurring revenue.
Indeed.
And a lot of electricians run away from maintenance for some reason. I don't know why.
Yeah, I find that crazy.
Yeah, it's money. I always say,
recurring revenue.
Yeah, when I was in industry, actually working for a living, recurring revenue was the message. We would sell systems cheap because we wanted the maintenance contract, because there's money in a maintenance contract.
Yeah.
So there are schemes, using the phrase that Paul hates.
Yeah, I do.
There is,
that.
yeah, the BAFE schemes, the LPS 1014 scheme. They are third-party certification. Same as they have in the electrical world, except the electrical world like to call it competent person schemes, and they're not competent person schemes. That really annoys me, and has always annoyed me. Because they are company schemes. So this is aimed at the company. So to some degree, we're getting there. We're almost there, because we have company schemes and we have people going out and looking at the company. But just like in the electrical world, the NIC inspector can't go round and see every job that an electrician has done.
Agree.
Yeah, and it's the same problem, but I'd say it's almost worse in Firewheel in that, like, I've always said I really like the BAFE scheme because it's a good set of procedures to work to, and far more than what any electrical competent person scheme requires anybody to work to. And it's good if you work to it, but it's so easily to get around to pass the audit. So easy.
It is, but the third-party certification bodies, I like the BAFE scheme.
Yeah.
And I like it for a few reasons. Is the BAFE themselves don't do any audits. They own the scheme and they write the rules. And then they have certification bodies that supply and do the audits. So if you don't like your certification body, you can go to another one.
Yeah.
So there's a bit of competition in the marketplace. Hopefully drive down prices for people. And if you think your certification body is rubbish or somebody else's is rubbish, you do have someone else to complain to. You can complain to BAFE themselves.
Yeah.
It's like any audit. Anybody can get around any audit. I'm not saying it's perfect, but at the moment, it's probably the best we've got.
Yeah, it's better than nothing,
for
sure. And that's like the CPSs for the electrical as well. It's better to have something than nothing, in some respects. Because I see people all over the industry and there's people either really like something like BAFE or they really dislike it. And I've always said it's good. It's good to have.
One of the things I like about the BAFE scheme is that it is a modular scheme.
Yeah.
So there are 4 modules, which are the 4 modules of 5839, which is design, install, commission, and maintenance. So you can start small and go further.
Yeah, and to be fair, I've been contemplating myself just getting the design BAFE modular, being part of that, because I get asked to design quite a lot, and if I wanted to do commissioning, I could also get that if I wanted to. So yeah, the modular scheme is good. And the reason I got BAFE accreditation in the beginning was simply because a client specified it, and it was a massive contract, and I couldn't not get BAFE. But then when I actually got BAFE through the SSAIB, they done their third-party audit, and I was really impressed with the SSAIB actually.
Yeah, I really like them. They've got probably one of the better attitudes in my view.
Yeah, they good guys. Really, they help. They've helped me. And Paul, I've called up Will before as a FIA member, asked for technical help, which is one method of sort of helping with my technical knowledge, and also the SSAIB. So there's 2 sort of different places to go to. Whereas I found within the electrical industry, I always struggled getting that help. Always.
Yeah, well, the FIA, we have a technical helpline. Anyone, you don't have to be a member, anyone can ring up. We'll speak to clients, because clients will ring us up and say, I'm doing it this way. Responsible people will ring up and say, I'm supposed to be responsible for fire safety in my building. What do I do? We have such a wide range of questions getting thrown at us constantly, and we don't mind talking to non-members because we want people to do it right.
I'll throw something at you then. So I'm one of the responsible persons for my railway. I was the same in my last role. And I'm fairly clued up as to the role of the responsible person and the various clauses of the reform order. And what scares me is I was on I'm not going to say which employer I was for, but I was on a job where a fire alarm system was being installed, as well as wiring and various other systems. And I, as a client, they didn't expect me to climb up a ladder and poke my head above the ceiling. And I saw lash up after lash up after lash up. And the first thing that came to my mind was the fire alarm, because it was just slung in above a suspended ceiling. So I pulled the supervisor, the engineer, technician, whatever you want to call him, and said to him, look, are you actually registered to do all this work? Are you registered with BAFE, or do you have an LPS certification or anything? The guy didn't know what I was talking about at all. And this again leads this leads to quality. So quality is mentioned in BS 5839 12 times, because while you were talking, I checked it. And all it talks about is manufacturer's quality assurance system against ISO 9000 series, which basically means have procedures, have management reviews, and hold records of complaints. Talks about quality of terminations, good quality equipment that satisfies relevant third-party standards, that the quality installation work needs to be able to be maintained, that you have a quality management system in place. Let's see what else. Manufacturer's quality assurance systems against ISO 9001. There doesn't seem to be much. There's not much in it other than the usual fluff.
Yeah, but don't forget, Paul, that you still work to 7671. This is just an add-on.
Yes. This is it, and this is the bit that everyone forgets.
Very true.
Which brings me to my favourite regulation in 7671.
Go on in.
Which is 560.10.
Okay.
Which is, you shall comply with the 5839 series.
Yeah.
And the fun thing is, if you actually read 5839 and it's 37.2a, if my memory serves me right. I am sad because I know 5839 too well. I'm really sad that I don't know.
You know better than I do. Oh yeah, fire detection alarm. Fire detection alarm systems shall comply with the relevant parts of 5839. It's as black and white, really, isn't it?
Yes.
Same as the one above it. Emergency lighting shall comply with 5266 and EN 1838.
Which is the fun thing if someone is stupid enough to write whole of building on an electrical certificate. Because
there's plenty of them out there.
Yeah, because if you write whole of building, that means, well, everything electrical. That means
I have had some of the biggest contractors in the UK turn up to do works or complete major project works. I'm talking about multi-million-pound jobs. When they were doing the entry into service review meeting, the electrical contractor's gone, there you go, there's my NIC certificate. And I've gone, and then they look around the room and they go, what? And 5839 cert? And a 5266 cert? And you straight away in those milliseconds can look in their eye and they'll either have completely screwed up and forgotten it, or they may not even have a clue what you're talking about because they'll have forgot to ask a specialist subby that they don't really care about.
Oh, no. They don't. The electrical contractor does not care about the poor fire alarm man.
No, they don't.
Now,
no,
we understand that 560.10 exists, and if you read 37.2a in 5839, we start going in circles, which is the entire system should conform to the requirements of BS 7671. Hang on.
So what was that?
37.2a. Yeah. So it says the entire system should conform to the regulations, the requirements of BS 7671 in general, the recommendations of this standard supplement, but do not conflict with these requirements. Where any such conflict is considered to exist, the recommendations of this standard should take precedence.
So yeah, in the battle of 5839 versus 7671, 5839 wins.
So what we're saying is something that we as E5 have always known, that most of these British standard committees need regular drug and alcohol testing.
No, you're close. Most of the British standards committees need regular drug and alcohol.
Yeah. Oh dear.
That is not a view of E5, by the way. We must put that disclosure in.
Yeah. Let's distance ourselves from that comment. It wasn't me, but to quote Dave Watts, the system does need burning down and starting again, which I love. Okay, that kind of leads, I think, so there's a lot, as I'm just putting my quality hat on as far as I don't see much as in quality of the organisations, the manufacturers, other than the token ISOs. I have, in fairness, found that if the directors of a fire alarm contracting company, and I will quote you one speech that I heard that sent a shiver down my spine. I was snagging a fire alarm installation job, which was awful, and the managing director of that small, and they were a small company, turned up. And I just said to him, dude, look how you've terminated these cables into the actual smoke detector. You've not even put a patras behind it. You can see the single core conductors just exposed. This just awful workmanship. And his words to me was, wow, it's amazing. It's great to have a client who actually wants a proper job for a change. And I was mortified. I was mortified that the managing director of this company was actually telling me he was relieved that there was a client who wanted the job done properly, because it's a fucking awful indictment of the state of our industry.
Yeah.
That's bad. By the way, he didn't do any more fire alarm work for me, because that's an awful. I would rather you come in and say, no, I'm doing it properly. This is how I'm going to do it.
So when you're querying quality, Paul, what are we talking? Quality of workmanship?
Yeah, always.
So
always.
So what we've just read here basically says you have to go back to 7671.
I know, good workmanship materials.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know.
The problem is that you don't have to have been an electrician to do fire alarms.
However, I'm going to throw this out there and say that if you're installing fire alarm system, like the installation part, cabling, I think you'll struggle to prove competence if you're not an electrician.
Yeah.
Well, just remember now, competency for the task, regulation 16, electricity work regs. But just for clarity and completion, regulation 13411 of BS 7671, good workmanship by one or more skilled or instructed. So technically you can have fire alarm installers who are instructed persons, and as long as they use proper materials, which would be compliant with the system design configuration used in the erection of electrical installations, the electrical equipment shall take account of manufacturer's instructions. This is the argument that the bone of contention, because this regulation used to say good workmanship by competent persons, and they removed it because competent persons sits in the electricity at work legislation, not within the British standard, and it just caused a lot of confusion. So they broke it down into this skilled or instructed, which we know can be manipulated, because you can have one guy on site who is actually skilled and competent at the task, but all of the general installation can be done by a labourer.
Yeah,
and responsibility, and that's basically what happened on the job that I was on. It was fire alarm labourers, or guys who were learning the fire alarm installation industry. They were picking up cable management, install cabling tips and tricks, but they were learning bad stuff. And then the guy who was commissioning it was going, yeah, as long as there's no faults and the panel's clear, away we go. I come along, stick my head above the panel and go, oh, you are not finished by a long shot, because he hadn't bothered checking it. And that's the problem.
Yeah, but then even when you're commissioning, there's a commissioning checklist of what is included in commissioning.
Well, you're talking cause and effect now, aren't you?
No. Oh, talking how it's been installed.
Yep.
Okay.
You're supposed to check the wiring.
Yeah.
You're supposed to have readings for the wiring, resistance readings, continuity readings.
I'm going to be honest with you now, lads. I don't think I've ever seen that.
So
ever.
So fire alarms are broken down.
Scares the hell out of me.
Like Will said at the beginning: design, install, commission, maintain, and you can have different people doing different parts of all of it. And I think you, within a business who does this type of work, you can manage that. Correct me if I'm wrong, Will, but BAFE, for example, will require a BAFE registered company to do design, commissioning and maintenance, but the install doesn't have to be. Is that right?
Not quite. I haven't looked at the BAFE scheme for a long time, but they used to say, and this always annoyed me, they used to say that the install could be done by a BAFE registered company or an NIC ECA registered contractor.
Okay, there's a cut and paste in itself.
Yeah, and that always never really sat right with me, because I liked the idea of a BAFE install company. And when I worked for the NIC, briefly, when they became Sergio, I was trying to explain to them that you can become the biggest BAFE provider by forcing your approved contractors, not the domestic crowd, the approved contractors, people doing commercial industrial work, which they had about 20,000 of them. It says if you can get 1%, which is a really small figure, into the BAFE scheme, you become the biggest BAFE provider. And I think that electrical contractors, if they're doing fire alarm install, should have the BAFE install module.
I agree. Yeah,
No, I agree.
Because the install, where I find companies fail, Will, is just things like the materials they use for terminating, for example, and how they do it, because everything has to have fire integrity, and people are using, materials that aren't up to scratch, the right quality. Because I've always found that electricians are always, usually the better at installing cabling and installing these systems, because they're used to it. This is what they do day in, day out, generally. You obviously get a lot of alarm companies who are used to running in shoelaces, and now they're running in FP. It's different. It's completely different, and it does take practice.
So I'm going to acknowledge my own lack of competence here. So for many, many years, I mean, I'll be honest, the last time I did fire as an intense on the tools was probably around 2004, 2005, when I was working for EDF. I was doing fire protocol upgrades, and that was all on Kentech panels, and that was a year of fun. But years ago, the only scheme that I knew of, and we never considered them a scheme, was LPS 1014 and 1035. If you wanted to do anything on London Underground, you had to have those accreditations. One was detection and alarms, and the other one was sprinklers. You couldn't do a thing unless you had that. BAFE have always been this new thing that me personally, I've probably never invested enough time in, although I have met the people from BAFE, and I think any new system or level of oversight is always a good thing. But I see a BAFE now do an LPS 1014 module. So this is obviously modules for contractors to go out and register. So are we suggesting, and I most certainly am anyway, is that any electrical contractor does anything on or near fire alarms should be registering with BAFE as well, and holding the relevant modules or accreditations, for want of a better term?
I would say so. I mean,
yeah, I would as well.
The core knowledge to install a fire alarm. Okay. The most complicated fire alarm in the country is a ring main to an electrician, because it's an addressable loop. We call them loops, you call them rings. It's two wires. If you can install a ring main, you can install a fire alarm. We have been using fire resistant clips since 2002. It's taken the electricians 16 odd years to catch up with us. Yeah. So it's FP200 or fire resistant cable. It's generally 2-core. You're not allowed to use 4-core. And it's fixed with fire resistant clips. It's a ring main. It's not difficult. There's a little bit you need to know, because we talk about obstructions and little things that the designer might not have seen on a drawing, and when you're on site you have to have that little bit of knowledge and a little bit of upskill to say, hang on a minute, this isn't right, this could cause a problem, I need to phone someone and take a photo and send it to someone and say, is this okay?
Because it's the installer who usually finds the problems with the design, because Paul, what happens is, like, when you design, you get a drawing, and obviously a drawing doesn't show always if there's obstructions on the ceiling, if there's there might be low beams or something like that, or when you're on site, when something changes, so a room gets cut into two, and therefore it changes the design. It's then down to the installer to communicate that with all applicable parties, and that usually is a failing. And obviously, if you didn't have the understanding of that when you were installing, that's when the whole thing fails, and then there's pressure when the person comes to commission and everything else.
Yeah, fire alarms they were always a high pressure asset on rail because of we've got to get the fire alarms in, we've got to get them commissioned, they've got to be ready for go live, station opening, station closures. So they've always been, once they're installed and switched on, they are the most precious thing on a railway station. On London Underground, guys who were getting paid fortunes just to go in and isolate zones and loops and stuff for the night shift, and if they didn't turn up, it would cost London Underground tens of thousands of pounds for not having this person to be able to do the work. It's quite frightening. I think it's an unloved. But I'm not going to put this in the same breath. But no, actually, I will. Fire alarms to me are the same as emergency lighting. They're like the poor cousin of the. No, I mean, no. But so I look at it from an infrastructure manager perspective. So you've got the construction and infrastructure industry. Tier 1 contractors, all they care is about a huge slice of the pie. That slice of the pie is called profit. As much as possible, please. Then you've got this other thing that you have to do. The civils and structures, yeah, they love all that. It's exciting. They win architectural awards. Then there's all the lights. Put the lights in, fine. Put all the cabling in. Now you're annoying people when you keep talking about cabling. Get it in, get it on, get it compliant. And the last two things that are always the poor cousin of everything is always the lighting design, the emergency lighting, and the fire alarms. Always. I mean, I've had so many chats with fire engineers, and I've said to them, I once actually had this as a true story. I turned around at a depot and I said, I would like a fire risk assessment, but I want to understand from your survey, I want a brand new survey where you are going to look at business and operational losses. So I don't just want evacuation. I want operational impact of a fire in my depot.
And protection of property.
Yes.
Yeah.
Wow. Honestly, it was like I'd slept with their sister. The walls went up straight away, and it was, oh, this is going to cost money. Yeah, I know it will. Get on with it. Oh, we're going to need to do modelling. Yeah, I know you will. Get on with it. Boy, oh boy, it was like trying to bring a horse to water and forcing its head underwater.
It's really strange you say that, because I mean, a lot of my work in my past life was historical properties, and literally, I mean, this isn't exactly the case, but it almost seems like property protection takes precedence over life protection because their properties are everything. It's more about protecting the property than it is the lives.
You walk into a fire risk assessors convention and you stand up in the middle of it and say, oh, you fire risk assessors ain't got a clue how to do property protection. Honestly, they'll want to lynch you. And yet all I wanted to know was, if there is a fire in this depot, would it stop the railway? Yes. So what measures do I need to take? Duh. Oh, yeah, but we've never had any money. No. Stop including money in it. We need an objective fire engineering reasoning and logic and assessment.
Yeah.
Go and do the modelling. Oh, look, we may need to put some form of suppression in areas.
Well, to be honest, right, so anybody who's listening who doesn't really understand fire safety and how this works is, as a fire alarm designer, you are told by the client what system is to be installed. They're supposed to get a fire risk assessment. It could be specified by, I don't know, insurers or whatever.
Stop right there. Hang on. Fire risk assessment. You're swearing at me now. Fire risk assessments are only for the existing infrastructure. I have so many people who turn around and go, if you give me your fire risk assessment, I'll do a design. Hang on a fucking minute. Excuse my language. Hang on a fucking minute. This is a fire risk assessment for what I've got currently. If you're making changes to it, the rules of the game change. Yes, I can give you all the existing information and everything else, but you need to ascertain and verify and validate and then come up with something new. It's like I'm building an extension and them saying, oh, you'll just do the same system. How do you know? You haven't done the due diligence.
Yeah.
Sorry, it winds me up.
But then if you're building changes, whether it's use, size, or the nature, you're supposed to have it fire risk assessed anyway.
Indeed, but a lot of fire alarm companies come in and go, oh, well, I can't do a design unless you give me a fire risk assessment. I'm like, okay, there's my fire alarm risk. There's my fire risk assessment. By the way, it probably doesn't mention what category I've got because the system's 30 years old, and the reform order came out when 2004. So you're not really going to have that, are you? But they look for the answers. They look. I'm sorry to say this, but a lot of fire risk assessors I've met have been really feckin' lazy, really lazy. They just want it handed to them on a plate.
I went to a course. It was like I think it was like a 3-day thing of passive fire protection, and the majority of people in there were fire risk assessors who basically were admin for some organisation who had been sent on a fire risk assessor course.
And that's what I found. I found a lot of them can't do that engineering logic. When you turn around and you start saying, I want to have a chat with you about Part B and BS 999, and I want to have a fire engineering discussion, they immediately go, oh, well, no, I just have a tick sheet that follows the clauses of the reform order. Right.
Yeah. Well, the reform order is only there to protect life. It isn't business continuity and property.
Indeed. Absolutely.
There is a handy little annex in the back of 5839 Part 1, which will give you some example categories that you can use. So if you want to pick a category out of the air, you can pick one. Lots of fire risk assessments don't even say a category, which is ridiculous.
Yeah.
And they just say, have a fire alarm, which is the worst thing I've ever seen.
Well, it's the cheap man's way out, isn't it? Rather than doing the due diligence, it's if you put an alarm. I've had fire engineering debates where I've sat there with Part B, open printed copy at 9999, and I've literally said, right, now let's debate the merits and the gaps between the two, and the evacuation routes and the times and all the rest of it, the levels of compartmentation, the risk of the building, the impact to operations, all this good stuff. And then somebody in the room's just gone, well, we just put a fire alarm in and that's it. We don't have to do all this bullshit. And you're like, wow, holy cow, how lazy is this?
See, I'm told across Europe, it's L1 generally. You put fire alarm system throughout, no matter what. Whereas the problem you get in the UK is that we have this weird culture of doing as little as we possibly can. And it's like, what can you get away with? Whereas we don't really go above board all the time because it's all about lowest cost and meeting lowest cost. And obviously, if you're a fire alarm company and go, look, we're going to do an L1 system, which is detection everywhere, then another one will come in and say, no, that's absolutely fine. Look, we're just doing L3. And of course, there's going to be a cost difference between that, which is always tricky.
I've seen many a place where it's we'll have a category L1 here, but we'll have an L5 here, and we'll have you end up with documents where they say in this area it's L1, in this area it's L3, in this area
that's basically an L5.
Yeah, but they define it and they break it down into different. Or we'll have just M here, and you just it's honest to God, fire engineering and fire safety. When Grenfell and all that happened, when we started talking about cladding, it's not hard to understand why. Architects seem to want to rue everything. I was in a meeting a few years ago about a brand new railway station that was being built. An architect was leading it, and after 10 minutes he wasn't leading it because he wanted to put all this wonderful cladding around a railway station. And I turned around and said, hey, I've got a great idea. Bricks. There you go. There's a system that's worked for years and will give us 120-year life, and maybe a bit of glass and a bit of steel, and then we don't have to worry too much about fire engineering. We'll just do a logical, small scale fire engineering approach. Oh, but no buts. You're not the client. Do what I'm asking of you. They tend to get the hump when you tell them that, because a lot of architects, and I'm going to say this on this podcast, all they give a toss about is designing something that will win them a goddamn award.
Well, it's looks, isn't it? It's aesthetics.
Yeah. They want to make something pretty.
They can poke their awards up their backside as far as I'm concerned. But yeah, sorry, it winds me up.
They're not all like that.
Listen, when you've got someone sitting on the other side of the room going, yeah, darling, for sure. So we'll occupy the space and it'll be, it'll attract the energy from around. And you're like, hang on a minute, mate. We don't want to attract the energy. All we're going to do is attract scumbags. Yeah, we just want it fit and functional. Stop being a moron.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, in 5839, the bit that everyone forgets is that they're used to their categories L1, L2, L3, and nobody really reads the objective of that category.
Okay.
Because they just read, oh yeah, well, it's L3, so that's the escape route and rooms off the escape route. They don't understand that the objective of that category is not to protect the room. We don't care about the person in the room with fire origin. They can die. Honestly, that is the truth. The person in the room with fire origin, most people will walk out of a room if it's on fire.
Yeah.
They don't need a fire alarm going off to tell them that the room's on fire, get out of the room. So an L3 category, an L3 category generally is okay if the people are awake.
Yeah.
And even in the likes of a hotel, because people say to me, "Oh, hotels have to be L1." Well, they don't. They can be L2, and L2 is fine for a hotel, because most people in a hotel bedroom, if there is a fire in the bedroom, they will evacuate. And even if there is the recent deaths in hotel bedrooms have all been people setting themselves on fire.
Yeah, and again, even if it's an L2, you still have sounders in those rooms.
Yes.
So you might not have detection as such, depending. I mean, most hotels, even a L2, will be in the rooms anyway. But generally speaking, yeah, you have sounders everywhere. You just don't have detection.
Well, railway stations, it's L1M. They're the ones that railway stations generally.
Yeah, but railway stations, though, I mean, I'm just thinking, I mean, my local station, Paul, literally is one room, but generally speaking, they're not.
In that case, if it's one room on a platform, I'll give you a perfect example. I worked on the DLR and there was a station, I'm not going to name it, and it was just a platform with one room, and it was a switch room and a storeroom. And I remember going there and there was a full, massive Kentech panel, all bells and whistles, and I'm thinking, is there an invisible building somewhere? And literally, I sat down, I went back to the office and I worked out how much it would cost to maintain, service, repair, upgrade the software, and do all the bits and bobs. And I worked out that it was like 75 grand over 15 years to have basically a fire alarm panel and a call point and a detector for a brick shed on a platform.
Yeah,
and it was such a waste of. There was no fire risk aversion whatsoever in it. It was just a waste of taxpayer money. It's the only words I can use. Funnily enough, once you made everybody aware of how much money you could save them by removing it, then people started to realise, oh, this asset management stuff's quite good. Yes, it is. Common sense in engineering can actually lead to some common sense savings rather than blanket systems. But just on a side note, question. Fire. You mentioned earlier on fire clips. What's the reg in 5839 for fire rating and fixing? I'm going to read to you while. Go on in.
Go on.
So I'll read you 7671. So regulation 52285. Every cable or conductor shall be supported in such a way it is not exposed to undue mechanical strain. Oh no, I'm reading the wrong regulation number. There you go. That just shows you I better change my glasses then. Why am I reading the wrong reg number?
Because there's so many of them.
And I need glass. No, I tell you what, I need new glasses. I'll find it in a minute. I can't remember it off the top of my head, which is really sad because I used to have this book memorized years ago, but I think that just shows I'm getting old.
There we are. I'm just having a look.
It is 26.2 C.
Yeah,
26.2C.
So I mean, it's a long. There's a lot to it, but I'll try and break it down here. So, so cable systems used for all parts of the critical signal paths and for the low voltage main supply to the system should adequately resist the effects of fire. For most fire detection and fire alarm systems, standard fire rating cables should be considered to provide sufficient resistance to the effects of fire with appropriate methods of support and jointing.
And then if you read F after that, which is across the page,
F is methods of cable support should be non-combustible and such that circuit integrity is not reduced below that afforded by the cable used and should withstand a similar temperature and duration to that of the cable while maintaining adequate support. So, long story short, if there's a fire, it needs to stay in place.
And it needs to continue to work, not just stay up which is what the electrical regs say.
Yeah,
So regulation 521.10.202
Mm.
states wiring systems shall be supported such they will not be liable to premature collapse in the event of fire.
So
and then there's
the
notes.
difference between electrical and fire is that the electrical is to stop the cable
From
collapsing
falling
and
down.
drooping down,
And the fire one is to keep it running.
to keep it running, to keep it going. And this is the thing: when you
Interesting.
speak to manufacturers, they will say you have to clip as per their spacing. Whereas electrical guys go, well, I can clip every 3 meters. That's absolutely
Yeah,
fine.
that's it. 1.2. They will. They'll just like they go bonkers.
And it's not true.
No.
If you speak to the manufacturers and ask them what is suitable to maintain the fire integrity of the cable to maintain the system, they will give the spacing factors.
Yeah.
So the electricians for 7671 are clipping, let's say 1 meter or whatever might be okay for premature collapse in some situations, but for fire alarm systems under 5839 Part 1, it is not.
No.
See, I won't allow fire alarm systems unless they're clip direct. I'll only allow them in conduit systems. I don't like having fire unless it's an MICC, which is a dying art. For me, it's always got to be in trunking and conduit now.
Steel though, yeah?
Yeah, steel, obviously,
Yeah.
not plastic. How dare you? Yeah, plastic. Not that red plastic that everyone just puts crappy clips around now and goes, "There's your fire alarm." Oh, it's a red. No, proper galv.
A lot of
Can I just say, because this is one of my little hobby horses.
Go on in.
When you're using galv conduit
Yes.
with fire alarm cables,
Yes.
does anyone ever consider the bend radius of the cable?
Yes. I knew you were going to say that. That's why I use a minimum of a 4x4x4 junction box so I can, before they enter the trunking, so I can actually bend it round, because you can't use conduit boxes on fire alarm. So I should probably add to that. Yeah. So one of the things of being baptized by London Underground is London Underground were the first people who realized you can't use 90-degree conduit boxes and expect an FP200 still maintain its integrity. And that's why every single fire alarm system, there'll always be a minimum of a 4x4x4 junction box to allow a cable to come up and then bend through. But even still, the bloke can lash it in. But yes, no, I insist upon those transition boxes.
Someone's doing it right.
Yeah, I'm doing it right. I know. I'm so glad you pulled me on that, because I completely forgot. But yeah, that's kind of like that's me on cruise control. But yes. So if you're listening, 4x4x4 galv boxes, just bush and couple them in, and use them to change direction or do what you need to do. It just gives you a little bit more play.
Yeah. Because the problem, the reason why I talk about bend radius is because if you bend a fire alarm cable, some manufacturers, there are different manufacturers of fire alarm cable, I'm not going to name them. Some manufacturers have an insulation which you can almost strip with your thumbnail.
Wow.
If you bend one of those, you're probably going to split it, and you're going to start getting the favourite of every maintenance engineer, earth faults.
Yeah.
Where it's touching the screen, because we don't have a CPC in fire alarms. We have a functional earth, which is a screen, because our method of protection is salve. That's what we use for our basic. And fault protection is salve, not automatic disconnection of supply. So we are in the electrical world, but we're down the voltage curve.
Yeah,
and
you
will get monitoring faults and high resistant faults, and it will cause your lovely addressable panel to throw up a load of faults, and then people go turn off those settings.
Exactly. Yeah. Also, it causes complacency as well, because when you get faults up on a system like a constant earth fault or intermittent earth fault over time, it's just the system's it's doing the earth fault again, and it might not be. It might be a genuine fault that needs to be even an earth fault should be rectified, but it just causes complacency again by the users of the system.
Well, also the installers as well. I have a dear industry colleague who rang me up a couple of weeks ago, and they had just installed a brand new fire alarm system, and I said to him, "Oh, how's it going?" And he said, "Awful." I went, "Why?" He says, "Well, I've turned up to like witness the cause and effect, and the first thing that the bloke said to me was, 'Oh, we've got loads of earth faults. Sorry, mate.'" And he was like, "Well, these are the guys who've installed it, and they've installed it with faults."
Yeah, but
which
Paul,
speaks volumes about the C word, which is our next subject to talk about.
But you don't just get earth faults from cabling, though. That's the thing. There's a manner of different things you can get earth faults from. This is the problem. I've had earth faults from equipment.
No, this was earth faults from the cabling.
Right.
They had lashed the cabling in. It was the guy who was doing the commissioning was the bloke who was clued up and basically had turned up to do the cause and effect and couldn't because his idiot colleagues hadn't bothered installing the cabling correctly.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. So yeah, no. Yeah, I like your hope and your aspiration. But, sadly, on the client world, me and many others see the crap daily, which leads to another C word, competence. The word competence appears 3 times.
Oh, God.
In the entire.
I was hoping you wasn't going to say this.
Sorry, are we talking? I'm not talking about that other C word. I'm talking about the far more offensive one, competence. This offends people far more than the other variant of the C word. So there's a few references. One is in 45.1 commentary where it says there's just a little note that says outside fire alarm servicing organisation, care needs to be taken to ensure that if for any in-house employees are used for this task, inspection and servicing, they have equivalent competence to technicians of a fire alarm servicing organisation. Competence of a fire alarm servicing organisation can be assured by the use of organisations that are third-party certified.
I really dislike that.
Well, I thought assured, or the word assurance, is a protected term anyway. You have to go through hell on earth. And I'm sorry, but as I get older, I lose more faith in UCAS as an industry body to do anything, to be perfectly frank. Much like BSI. I'm kind of losing faith in organisations that charge hundreds of thousands of pounds for contractors to own a full suite of standards, which they shouldn't be doing the job if they don't own them, but yet they can't do the job. It's this vicious circle, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's like the railways. The standards on the railways used to be free. Okay. Now the railways have stopped it. So you now have to pay to access the railway standards. And the contractors will then buy the standards and bill them back to the railway with a markup, which then costs the railways more, even though the standards don't cost them anything. It's just dumb because they're already there. It's just silo tribal stupidity. But yeah, it says it obviously mentions competence there, but there's also a reference to when you're modifying. This is a beautiful number, 46.41. In the commentary, modification of a system involves an element of redesign. That's a cracking term, by the way, because that is bang on. I wish that was in 7671.
Or redesign.
Yes, it's true though. Alterations, additions are an element of redesign. Responsibility for modification of a system needs to rest with a person who has a significant degree of design competence. That is phenomenal. I love that statement. But there isn't that much on a competence other than reference to competence of a technician.
We have the definition of competent person, and competent person gets used more than competence.
That's right. That's a very good point, actually. Let me just competent.
Yes, competent is 29 times, a few more times. And the cost of standards, because electricians moan about the cost of 7671. And I love the cost of 7671 because 5839 is £330.
Yeah, and that's just part one.
That's just part one.
Yeah, you got part 6. You got so many others that.
So So maybe I'm not narrating this as well as I should. So let's do a little role play. I want to start up P-Mean and electrical contractor tomorrow. Now, I need to buy a copy of the wiring rigs. I want to do fire alarms. I want to do emergency line. I want to do all this sort of stuff. I then start to realise that I need to own a standards collection that could cost me £5-6 grand. Let's just say, plus all the guidance notes. Okay, so that I can be diligent. I've got to. Who do I bill for that? How do I make money? Where do I get that cost from? Do I put that on overheads? Fine, I'll put it on overheads. Yeah. But then, how do I make any money back? How do I win any work?
So. If some providers, like I know the SSRB do, ECA do, NAPIR, I believe
they do. Yeah,
you can buy a BSI subscription.
Oh yeah, it's probably fair to add that I actually do have a subscription as well via work. So,
obviously you have a subscription.
I'm not that rich.
Which they're usually about 100 something quid, like nothing crazy per year.
They can get crazy. They can.
Yeah, it can.
Oh,
if
yeah.
you go outside of what you
Transport for London's one was biblical. It was hundreds of thousands of pounds a year.
But I'm talking about
But
if
they
it was
accessed every standard on the planet.
if it was P meaning electrical.
Oh yeah, no, sorry, yeah, it was P mean electrical, yeah.
But obviously, it's part of your it's your overheads, and that's what's got to go towards your costs. And the thing is, Paul.
Go on.
Sorry, go on. What did you
I
say?
was say not a lot of electrical contractors have them.
No, they don't. You're right.
And they don't provide them to their staff.
Most electrical contractors come to me. I spend a lot of CPD going through either part 1 or part 6, where an electrician is asking me some stuff, and it's because they don't have the standards.
So how about this then? If these standards are supposed to be for safe, let's be honest about it. Standards are predominantly about system or product safety.
Yeah,
effectively.
Safety, yeah.
Protection of UK infrastructure, the people who use our equipment or machines or whatever. Why are they not free? Silly question. If we're worried so much about competence, why are they not free?
It's clearly financial.
It is financial. Sadly, to me it's a double standard from the BSI, who operate under a world charter and are completely unaccountable to government, and that sits very weirdly with me, especially post Grenfell, because there's a lot of issues and discussion around the word competence and what it is. And there's evidently, if you could probably help a lot of people by making some of these standards free, because they'd access them and there would be an influx of people wanting to do CPD and wanting to enhance this, which could only make the industry better and reverse the race to the bottom. Again, it's just a view and opinion, that's all. Just for the definition of this, section 312 of 5839 2017, a competent person is a person with the relevant current training and experience and with access to the tools, equipment and information, and is capable of carrying out a defined task. I love that. It's a cracking one.
Prior to 2013, it didn't say current. Oh, really? It only said training, and that really annoyed me. And it's one of my legacies, I suppose, is that I shoehorned the word current into the definition.
Good for you. Because
I still get a lot of people ring me up and start saying, "Oh, you maintain a fire alarm 4 times a year." No, that was changed. It's twice a year, and lots of people know the old regulations. Oh yeah, you can wire it in non-fire resistant cable as long as you do the bells in fire resistant. No, that was prior to 2002.
Oh wow, yeah.
So they don't stay current with the regulations. And
no, I struggle as well. I struggle too.
Yeah, to be fair though, BS 5839 hasn't changed much really over time. And
since 2002 was the big change.
Yeah. And it's actually quite easy to read compared to 7671. It's actually quite easy to read.
It is. I'll agree with that. Yeah. I totally agree with that. I think it's a good standard. When I was doing fire alarm protocol upgrades 2004, I liked it. I thought it was easy to digest. Same with emergency lighting. I found 5266 and that suite of standards, the way they mapped, I thought it was really simple and easy to understand. I didn't understand why people didn't understand it, and then I realized nobody bothered reading it. Yeah, and that was the problem. Or people didn't want to fork out, or there wasn't a business case for it, or a number of other reasons. But right, okay. End users. I'm an end user. As I said earlier on in this podcast, I'm really struggling. What advice would you have for me as a client to improve my own fire alarm, my approach to fire alarms?
I would suggest to you there's plenty of company like manufacturers even that do some seminars and free training. It's free, a lot of it's free, to actually go and upskill yourself as an end user. You can another thing I think is really important with depending on what you're doing and what your building is actually having a consultant who has your interest, who actually takes some personal responsibility for anything that's done with fire alarm systems as well on your behalf. Personally,
there is a lot of good information on the FIA website, which is free.
Yeah.
We do most of the stuff that we do as the FIA is free. This is not an advert for the FIA.
No, please carry on.
So as a client, yeah, go to the FIA website. There's a lot of information free. You, as a client, you need to educate yourself as a client, and the more you educate yourself as a client, the better end product you will get. I mean, how much research do you do before you buy a car, or do you just walk onto the used car dealership and say,
"Oh God, loads and loads." I actually had a car that I owned catch fire while I was in it, which was really, that's another story for another podcast. But yeah, I was actually in a car when it caught fire.
So doing a bit of research to purchase a fire alarm system for your building, which will probably last 10, 20 years. You know, these things last. And
yeah.
Do you do no research at all?
I see fire alarm systems as the keep me out of prison. However, I don't really have massive issues with the fire alarm systems themselves until when it comes to funding them to upgrade them. It's the applied competence of the people viewing fire safety that I do have massive issues with. And I was really pleased when the Grenfell report started coming out that there was challenges to be made on the whole competency and access and authorization in the fire alarm industry. My competence is constantly rusting, which is one of the reasons why I like Dan, because I use him to kick the rust off of me. If we don't have him, I would probably be struggling, in all fairness. Love you, Dan.
Prior to not that long ago, there was no real qualification for a fire alarm engineer. And let's not call them engineers, let's call them what they are, they're technicians.
Oh, engineers, listen, the term isn't a protected title anyway,
yeah.
So.
Should be.
Oh, you'll never win that debate ever, trust me, I've had it with BT.
But there's never been proper recognised qualifications. When I started doing fire alarms as an electrician, I thought, oh, well, there's probably got to be like a 17th edition course type thing that I'll do to learn about fire alarms, or there'll be like a 236 part 1 in fire alarms, and there wasn't. And it was like, what do you mean there isn't? And it was, well, you just do it, and this is what you do, and this is how you do it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until I started educating myself, and I finally ended up in a specialist contractor, that I actually had a copy of the standard, and I read the standard, and that's more or less how I know how to do fire alarms, by reading the standard.
Yeah, same here.
I know you feel that. Funny enough, when I was doing fire alarms, I didn't, I couldn't find any training, but my boss found like a diploma, but that was more for general fire management, and that was like 4 or 5 weeks, and that cost thousands, so it was completely inaccessible to any electricians or engineers. It was only management.
Well, to be honest, guys, if we want to talk about training and qualifications in fire, I mean, it's another day.
Oh yeah,
yeah, it is. It is
a whole big can of worms.
Yeah, Jesus.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Right, I think we should probably thank you, Will, and kind of wind this up here, because we don't like these going over an hour if we can. Although this has been a fascinating one, I've learned something new. I've learned that my competence pencil needs to be sharpened when it comes to fire systems. So yeah, on that note, final thoughts, Will?
If you are an electrician, you should be doing fire alarms. It's more money. Get yourself trained, get yourself competent, get a copy of the standard. It's just like your drill. It's a tool in your toolbox. Get base installation and go out to the big boys, because they'll love you.
Well, I can't argue with that, really, to be honest with you. Yeah. Dan, final thoughts?
To be fair, well said, Will. I'm always saying to electricians who come to me and they want to get into fire, I give them advice, I can guide, I can help, or whatever. But yeah, it's about it costs, but it's an investment. So yeah.
Okay, right. Well, that's it for this one. Thank you very much for listening, everybody. Please, if you like this, share it on social media. Make sure you subscribe to E5 Twitter. We're on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, YouTube. And until the next one, Will, thank you very much for your time, sir. This has been really, really good.
Anytime.
Until the next one, take care of yourself and each other. Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.